Good afternoon. I'm Anna Nichols. I'm the Director of Communications at Altair Advisors. Welcome to the 2023 Investment Forum. We have a very full room today. We're very excited about that, and thank you for coming out to be with us. Most people know us today as our audience is primarily Altair clients. But for those of you who are guests today, Altair is a private, independent wealth advisory firm. We provide investment management, financial planning, and client education services to a select group of individuals, families, foundations, and endowments. Our tagline is Wealth Guidance for Life, and we use that because we believe that the clients we work with make decisions on their wealth based on what they would like it to do in their own life and provide in the lives of their family members. Our role is really to provide clients with the investment oversight and the financial guidance to help make those goals achievable. And programs like this are actually an extension of some of the customized work that we do for clients. This is an opportunity for us to bring our client group together. And today's program, we're actually going to record it because we do have a lot of people that called and said, I can't be there, but I'd like the recording. So it will be recorded. We won't have you on video, but we will be recording the stage today. And we're going to cover two main topics. We're going to start off with Jason Laurie, our Chief Investment Officer, who's going to give us a market update. And he's going to review the major economic factors sharing the financial markets and the global economy. And after that, we're going to have two sessions centered on artificial intelligence. In the first, Christian Hammond, a professor of computer science at Northwestern University and co-founder of the artificial intelligence company Narrative Science, will give us an overview of the implications of AI. And after a short break, David Lynn, Altair's head of research, will lead a discussion with Anthony Zachary and Lee Marie Braswell, expert representatives from two of the managers that we work with on public and private investment opportunities in AI. We're going to save time for Q&A at the end of both AI sessions. We know there's a lot of questions on this topic. We encourage you to ask those questions. We'd like this to be as interactive as possible. There'll be two of us with microphones that will go around to try and get to you with your question, but we'll make sure we can all hear those. If we don't, for some reason, get to your question today, if we run out of time, we'll be here at the reception, and we can also follow up with you after the program. A few quick housekeeping notes. We're going to be taking a break at 3:30 p.m., and if you need them, restrooms are downstairs on the first floor. And also, if you valet park today, you can get a voucher for that parking just outside the door at our front registration desk. And finally, we are hosting a reception once the program's over, and we hope that you can join us for that. It'll be right next door. So with that said, I'm now going to turn things over to my colleague, Altair's Chief Investment Officer, Jason Laurie.
Thanks, Anna. Let's see here. Oops, not on. There we go. Thanks, Anna. As Anna said, my name is Jason Laurie, Chief Investment Officer here at Altair Advisors. And I'm going to start with a market overview and then hand it off to the next two sections to focus really in on artificial intelligence. And when we kind of sit down and decide what is going to be the area of focus on the forums, we kind of think about it in really three buckets. What is moving markets today, what we think is going to move markets in the future, and then what kind of questions are we getting from our clients. And last year when we sat down to do the meeting, it was a pretty short meeting because it was going to be interest rates in the Fed. And for those that attended the program, that's really what it was all about, is interest rates in the Fed. And although that topic is still very important, and I've dedicated a few slides to it, we're at the cusp where the market's starting to look beyond at the next, what's going to move markets in the future. Earnings is sort of a more near term, and then longer term artificial intelligence. But as you'll see in a minute, artificial intelligence is actually moving the market today. So with that, I'll start with a quick year in review. And so as many of you know, each quarter Altair commissions a cartoon. And the objective of the cartoon is to capture the main events of the quarter that is moving markets. The second objective, which is far down on the list, and sometimes we don't exceed, is actually be funny, and that doesn't always happen. So first quarter, the cartoon was the regional banking crisis. And how many people walk around or remember that in 2023, we've had 3 of the 5 largest bank failures in history? We're kind of already forgot about it. But our slide here was the government with the Fed with Jay Powell, the Treasury with Janet Yellen, and then probably a lesser-known character, chairman of the FDIC, with Martin Gruenberg. And of course, when you have a failed bank, the FDIC takes that over. So the first quarter, that really was what was moving markets, and that end of the first quarter in March was really kind of what that was all about. And they were able to stabilize the regional banks. There's no question about it. That's why we're not talking about it as much. But the damage that was done during that crisis, it still exists today. And I have a slide or 2 on that. And if you look at the regional bank index, it's still down 30% year to date. So stable, yes, certainly not back. Second quarter, it was all about the topic that we are going to talk about today, which is artificial intelligence. And it was all the enthusiasm over AI and ChatGPT that had come out at the end of last year. And it was dubbed the Magnificent Seven, and that after the 1960s Western. And the concept here is the market was trying to pick or front-run the winners of the beneficiaries, or at least near-term beneficiaries of artificial intelligence. And really, the winners it was picking was the largest of the large tech stocks. And by the way, it's not just tech stocks, it's the largest stocks in the US, in the S&P 500. So we got Amazon, Apple, Meta, NVIDIA, Tesla, Google, and Microsoft. And what you'll see in a minute in my slide is even through today as we stand here, pretty much all the return in the stock market this year has come from these 7 stocks. So again, as I say, when we were selecting the topic, it's not just about this far-off future artificial intelligence theme, it's having an effect on markets today. Then our last cartoon, which we just released about 2 weeks ago, is on the consumer. And it is a play off the 80s arcade game Donkey Kong. And of course, only us Gen Xers could think of this, David and I. If you remember what's going on here is Mario is trying to make his way up the steel girders, and Donkey Kong is throwing all these things at him. And the reason why we put this here is because we think it's one of the linchpins as to whether we're going to avoid a recession. We're not in a recession. You'll see in a minute a lot of people thought we were going to be in a recession, but we're not. And the reason we're not in a recession is because the consumer has powered the economy. They have not flinched or blinked. And that really is the reason why we're not in a recession. And so the question is, how long can Mario last getting these barrels thrown at him? And you'll see in a second, there's certainly pressures are building, but it's not yet at the forefront. So let's take a second and check in on how markets of the major asset classes are doing year to date. This is as of 10/31, so end of October. We went to print at the end of October, and who would have guessed that the last 5 trading days were the best 5 trading days in 10 years, but we went to print. What you can kind of see is that really all the return is up here in large cap at 10, 11%. And more specifically, as I hinted at before, all of it's really coming in large cap growth. And by the way, if I would run this as of yesterday's close, the S&P would be up 15, not 10 or 11. And really, what you're going to see is pretty much all the other major asset classes, I think it's fair to say, ho-hum at best. And these are the asset classes. These are not any one manager. And including our bonds. We're on the verge of having a 3rd year of negative returns in bonds. So that is a historic if that's how it ends this year. So again, all of these are about 5% higher. As I said or hinted at before, pretty much all of that return in the S&P 500, the large cap growth, is coming from those 7 stocks. It's really kind of amazing. If you look at that 10% number, see if I can get it here. It just conked out on me. There we go. If you look at the constituent parts of the S&P 500, so there's believe it or not, there's 503 stocks in the S&P 500. You'd think there'd be a rule not to have more than 500, but there's not. And it turns out that the top 7, Microsoft, NVIDIA, Apple, Amazon, are accounting for basically all of the return of that 10, 11% that's now 15. And if you take the 496, it's basically flat. Not every stock, but on average is flat. So when we talk about a topic that's not just this far-off future topic that's really moving markets today, that belief that euphoria over artificial intelligence is certainly moving some of these big tech players already. Probably front-running it, but still moving it. But the next 2 sessions are going to sort of broaden out more than just these magnificent 7 and talk far more about all the implications. And we're going to bombard you today with headlines. Here's my headline slide, but there's more coming, I promise. And the basic concepts, I pulled headlines in the last 3 months. 1, we're at the early innings of artificial intelligence. 2 is regulation. And it's not just heating up, but the Biden administration already issued a 111-page executive order on the topic. I'm not sure people actually know what it says or does yet, but we're there. And then, of course, what David and his panel is going to talk a lot about is the opportunities, the investment opportunities. So we're going to move away from just talking about large cap growth, just talking about these 7 stocks, to a much broader topic in the next 2 sections. So backing up to kind of topics that are moving the markets or of concern, both positive, I should say, and negative. So the first is, for obvious reasons, we needed to check in on geopolitical events. And one of the things that we put together, we actually updated this slide. Unfortunately, we created the slide last year when Russia invaded Ukraine and re-updated it now when Hamas attacked Israel. And what you can see here is that if you take all of the geopolitical events, that's the gray line, going back to 1940, so 84 years, including 1940, what you kind of see this pattern is markets kind of get nervous, as you would expect, and fall. And then if you kind of go out to like the 6-month period, you see that you're almost pretty much back. And the punchline here is really, in general, geopolitical events on average really aren't moving the market long term. Market being defined as S&P 500. You can see where we're at with Hamas, Israel. Now, if I, again, updated this through yesterday, this now red line would be above 0. A lot of folks, though, are worried about not just the S&P 500, but oil, especially when you're talking about an area with oil producers. And what happens with oil and geopolitical events is sort of the reverse of what happens with the S&P 500. S&P 500 usually dips and then kind of comes back. Oil does the opposite. Anytime there's a geopolitical event, oil will pop. And then what you can see is it usually kind of comes back down to at or below where it was. And I think the biggest issue is that oil is just more a function of what's going on in the economy than it has anything to do with the geopolitical event. And again, if I would, yesterday was obviously the 1-month mark, and oil is below where it was on 10/7. And this is back through 1990, so 34 years. So I said that I haven't forgot about rates in the Fed and interest rates. So we are going to talk a little bit about what has happened in the bond market, and in particular with Treasury yields, because it certainly impacts pretty much all financial assets. In your deck inside there that we printed out, you have the final. This is sort of a build slide, so I'm going to make you dizzy here for a second. But what I wanted to focus on is we came into the year with a yield curve that looks just like this. So how a yield curve works is this is the short end, so these are 3-month treasuries, and these are, of course, the long end. And so 3-month treasury was yielding about 4.5 or 4.6, 4.7, and then the 7-year was at about 4. So we had an inverted yield curve. Front end was higher than the long end. That's not normal, but it is normal in a rate hiking campaign from the Fed. And as we go through each quarter, you'll kind of see what happens to the yield curve. Now, the Fed controls the front end of the yield curve. We came into the year with the Fed funds rate at 4.25. The Fed has raised rates by 1%, 0.254 times. The last time they did it was July. And what you'll notice in a second is the front end of the yield curve basically just follows what the Fed is doing. The Fed is raising, the front end will go up. When the Fed pauses, the front end of the yield curve will pause. So you can kind of see and focus just on the front end. I'm going to do this again on the long end, but on the front end, Fed raised rates. You can see the front end of the curve just kind of follows it. Fed raised rates again and then pause. This is the third or the fourth time, and then they paused. That was July, was their last raise. So now when we go to September, front end of the curve really didn't move because the Fed had paused. And the Fed was, in our view, done raising rates for this rate hike campaign. So that was the front end of the curve. So we still very much have an inverted yield curve. So I'm just going to back this up for a second. So we start here at the long end. Now the long end of the curve, the Federal Reserve does not control. But the long end of the curve is far more impacted by how the bond market views future economic growth. If it views that future economic growth is strong, this yield is going to go up. If it feels that it's weak, that yield is going to come back down. So we had the regional banking crisis, the cartoon I just showed you. Watch what happens to the long end. Right on cue, gets nervous, thinks it's going to be a recession. Future economic growth is going to be lower. Fed comes to the rescue and stabilizes the assets, takes over the banks. We pop back up. We kind of move beyond the recession scenario that dominated much of the year. And we kind of end the third quarter with a much higher long end rate. So what's happened this year? The front end of the curve has just followed the Fed, and now the long end of the curve is finally starting to catch up. So that would say the bond market believes that expected growth is higher than it did at the beginning of the year, and it would also say that they probably believe the Fed is done raising rates. Now we're going to talk in a minute about this big jump at the end of the third quarter to rates that we actually now feel are fairly attractive at that longer end. For the Altair clients in the room, which I know are most of you, you know in the taxable portion of your fixed income portfolio, we have been rolling short-term treasuries to kind of capture this upward trend for the last year or so. Can't talk about yields and the Treasury yield curve without talking about inflation. Certainly the topic last year that kind of sucked all the oxygen out of the room is inflation. Left-hand side is core CPI. And just as a reminder, core CPI, we strip out energy and food. And what you can, as opposed to headline, and what you can see is that we peaked out at about 6.6. Now, some people in the room may have 9.1 in their head. Well, that was the peak out at headline. But core is the 6.6. So we're on the right trend. It's coming down. It's not where the Fed wants it, which is around 2%, but it's on the right path. On the right-hand side, the team broke the core CPI into two parts. They divided it into goods, so apparel, vehicles, et cetera, manufactured goods, and services. And so what you notice by the chart is we've pretty much stripped inflation from the goods economy. However, the services, it's coming down, but it's pretty sticky. It's pretty sticky. And the reason for that is because services are the most impacted by wage inflation. We still have a very strong labor market. And That is really why the Fed is at the rate they're at right now. I mean, if it was all about goods inflation, the Fed would already be cutting a long time ago. But services is what's keeping it up there. And so as the labor market loosens up a little bit or actually gets a little worse, wage inflation will decrease and that services should follow. And by services, the biggest category in services is shelter, or really what they call rent equivalent, which is sort of an esoteric Fed term, but it just means their formula for what it would cost to rent your own house. I said a few minutes ago that I can't help myself when you can poke fun at the economists and when they told us all we were going to be in a recession, so here goes. The Wall Street Journal has conducted this survey of economists since 2006, so going back roughly 17 years, and I just kind of plotted here back to January 21. First off, let's talk about this gray line, which tells you that in any given year, 25% of the economists think we're going to be in a recession in the next 12 months. So the baseline is kind of 25%. You can sort of ignore that first 25%. And what you can see is almost exactly 1 year ago, 63% of economists said, right now, we should be in a recession. And we're, of course, not in a recession. And just to put this into context, this is a number we really only saw in 2008 and really that first few weeks of the dark days of COVID shutdown. So this is really an outlier figure, but they certainly have been very, very wrong as far as predicting the recession this year. I said it before, why are we not in a recession? Well, we're not in a recession because the consumer has just been very, very strong. They have been able to hop over all of Donkey Kong's obstacles. And this is just retail sales. We could put a number of slides up here, but what you can see is the chart keeps going up. The last reading was positive at 0.7%. Now, the consumer has been impacted by inflation, so that this does not mean that unit volume is increasing. It just means dollars are going higher. But certainly, the consumer has really held up this economy. Consumers can usually hold up the economy when when the job market is very strong. So I've picked a few slides here. One is just the initial jobless claims. I like this slide because it's very real time. We get it every Thursday morning. And what you can see is we've just been bouncing around this 200,000 mark every week, and that's very healthy, that's very normal. You'll read a lot about, well, the slope of the initial jobless claims and all this stuff. 200,000 or roughly is fine, it's healthy. That's not indicative of any kind of a recessionary environment. We still also have 1.5 job openings for every unemployed person. We peaked out at 2, so it's come down, but we still have far more openings than we do, or far more job openings than we do unemployed people. So that's why the wage growth is still under pressure. Of course, one of the major markers of a recession is GDP growth. If we have negative GDP growth, it's not the only marker. And you can see from this year, Q1, Q2, Q3, we certainly do not have negative growth. And in fact, the quarter that we just got, 3Q, was what we would call a blowout quarter at 4.9%. That was huge, and pretty much Atlanta Fed actually nailed that one, but it was pretty much the only group that nailed that high number. So again, far from a recession. The real-time indicator in Q4 is about 2%. Again, coming down. That 4.9 is not sustainable, but certainly not anything recessionary that the real-time indicators are telling us right now. As you probably remember from last year, we were in this negative 2 quarters, and it really was the hangover from the initial period of COVID. Again, that was never marked a recession, but it was certainly just the hangover of the goods economy actually sort of getting out of control. So that sounds like a lot of good news. So let's flip the page for a second. What are we concerned about? Well, what we're concerned about is that these obstacles keep coming and keep coming for longer. Higher rates for longer do impact the consumer. I don't think it's new news to anybody in this room, but mortgage rates are at highs over the last few decades, a 30-year mortgage approaching 8%. And over the COVID period, the consumer really built up this war chest of savings. We had fiscal and monetary policy, and if you have disposable income minus consumption, you had a lot left over because people were making more than they were consuming, so they had excess savings. Well, what you can see is consumers are dwindling that. They're eating into that. Now, this number is still historically high. This only goes back to 20, but it clearly is showing a trend that in order for consumers to keep spending, they are dwindling their savings. So certainly on the consumer side, this is what we're watching very closely, because if the consumer can keep up, we will avoid a recession, and you'll see in a minute, if the earnings, corporate earnings keep up, markets will do just fine. Let's turn to the business side. That was the consumer side. In my mind, this is probably the most bearish slide I have in the deck, which is credit and on the business side. So this is a senior loan officer survey. So they asked senior loan officers at banks, are you increasing your standards, tightening your standards, or decreasing? So it's pretty clear that everybody's increasing their standards, meaning that it's harder for businesses to get a loan today. And I know many of you run businesses or sit on boards, and you all know that to be very true, is that bankers are not doing the same thing they did 18, 24 months ago. And so that is probably on the business side, the most negative of the slide. So I would say, people always say, what are you watching on the negative slide? Business side, we're watching this. Consumer side, we're watching this. Now moving to probably the most positive slide in the deck, which is corporate earnings. This is going back to Q2 22. This is the change year over year in S&P 500 corporate earnings. We went through an earnings trough that's been kind of well publicized. We're right here smack dab on the Q3 earnings. We're about 85% through. And that's going to come out to be about 4% growth. So that's pretty good. And I think you have to go all the way back to my first slide when I talked about the selected market returns, which is that most asset classes have given us no return this year. And last year, if you remember, 22 didn't give us a lot of return. So if we have earnings growth, that means the market's getting cheaper. And that means that you can easily see a big snapback. I think probably more importantly is some of the future earnings growth. These are FactSet, and they update these pretty much every week. And so again, still very positive follow through. So if these bars, simply put, come true, when I'm standing up here a year from now, the market will do very well. Because you will have follow through in the market if you've got this kind of earnings growth, which we have not had. All right, well, I will end with, first off, what we're a real-time trade we're making inside portfolios, and then I'll do a quick recap and then invite Anna to come back up and introduce our keynote speaker. Again, as I mentioned, for all the Altair clients in the room, in the taxable fixed income portion of your portfolio, we've been rolling short-term treasuries. We started with 6-month, we moved to 3-month. And over this last few months, last few quarters, now what's happened is, I mentioned, the long end of the treasury curve, I'm looking at the 7-year treasury, has spiked up. And so now these are becoming very attractive to us. And so we are just at the beginning phase of moving client portfolios or recommending client portfolios move from the shorter term treasuries into this 7-year treasury. Because for really 2 reasons. One, just the absolute return of 4.5 to 5% for taxable fixed income is historically very good and not one we've seen in many, many years. The second reason is where we are in the Fed rate hike cycle. So I have the last 6 rate hike cycles on this, call it spaghetti chart here. And what you can see is that when the Fed does their final rate hike, these charts are of course easy to make in hindsight because you know when the Fed is done, but you don't always know when the Fed's done when you're looking forward. What you can see is when they're done raising rates, some of these spaghetti lines, rates keep coming up for a little while, but if you look at all 6 cases, 12 months out, rates are lower, and sometimes materially lower. 2006 is kind of in the same spot, but more or less, when the Fed is done raising rates at the end of this of a rate hike cycle, rates fall. So in our mind, that says I'd like to capture today's rates, that 4, 5, 4, 6. If you get one of these spaghetti lines that comes way down the rates, that means we'll get 2 components to the return. We'll get our income, that 4, 5, 4, 6, and we'll also get capital gain appreciation. So that is sort of real time of what we're doing. And some of you have already caught wind of that in our materials. So let me recap, and then I'll invite Anna back up to introduce our keynote speaker and kind of dive off the deep end into the artificial intelligence topics for today. So first off, really the market has been driven by the Magnificent Seven so far. That's where really all of the return is coming, especially in the large cap market. Hamas's attack of Israel certainly has raised global risk, but the reality is those kind of conflicts, geopolitical conflicts, longer term, 6 months out, do not really impact the S&P 500. The Fed has been rising rates. You saw it on the front end of the curve, and now finally that long end of the curve is starting to catch up. Inflation is starting to slow, but it's certainly been gradual and bumpy. And the consumer has really powered this economy. And so we're keeping an eye on those. What does higher for longer, the higher interest rates for longer, how does that impact the consumer? So certainly something we're concerned about both on the business side and the consumer side. And then finally, a real-time opportunity that we're taking advantage of in portfolios, starting to migrate from short-term treasuries to longer-term treasuries. Okay, so with that, I am going to call Anna back up to introduce our keynote speaker. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason. Our next speaker is Dr. Christian Hammond. He's going to provide us with an overview of the impacts of artificial intelligence. And given the topic, I decided to take a new direction when creating his speaker intro. Usually I would go in and look at Dr. Hammond's bio, and I would spend time maybe on Northwestern's website and look at his research and things like that. But I decided I'd simply go into ChatGPT, and I typed, "Write a speaker introduction for Christian Hammond." And unlike my kind of tedious process and stress about word choice, what came back was really instantaneous. I do feel a little bit like I cheated, like I kind of need to come clean rather than just reading this out without saying anything. I don't know why. Maybe my high school English teacher will show up or something. But I wanted to read what I found because I thought it was pretty impressive. So, Dr. Hammond, this is what came up for you. Christian Hammond is a pioneering figure in the field of artificial intelligence and a prominent thought leader in the intersection of technology and society. With a career spanning decades, Hammond has significantly shaped the landscape of AI research, application, and ethical considerations, contributing to the advancement of natural language processing, machine learning, and automated reasoning. As a distinguished professor, research, and entrepreneur, Hammond has made pivotal contributions to the development of innovative AI systems that have revolutionized industries and redefined human-machine interactions. Beyond his academic and technical accomplishments, Hammond is known for his ability to bridge the gap between complex AI concepts and their real-world implications, making him an influential voice in the public discourse and policy discussions surrounding the ethical and societal impacts of AI. As a prolific author and speaker, he has inspired countless individuals and organizations to embrace the transformative potential of AI. With his invaluable contributions, Hammond continues to shape the trajectory of AI's role in shaping the future of humanity. I thought that was pretty good. One thing I thought was funny about it is it never actually says where he's a renowned professor or any of the places where he worked. I thought that was a little funny that that got left out. But if you're interested in that, we have that in his bio. That's right here in your brochure. So I will let you look that up. It does relay the impressive expertise that Dr. Hammond has, and we're excited about him being here today to talk with us. So with that said, I'm going to introduce Dr. Christian Hammond. Thank you.
Am I on?
You are on, and let me make sure. Oops, sorry. Okay, do you want this? Yeah.
I'm going to stay down here. That was a very sweet intro. That really was. So one of the first things I did when, at the beginning of the release of ChatGPT, I asked for an intro of my dad. My father's a Middle Eastern archaeologist. And I had to struggle a little bit with the system to get it to give me what I wanted. But it ended up with an intro, a bio. That was awesome. It was awesome. It went through my dad's career and his life. He was born in England, and in particular, he was born in London. Was educated at Oxford. Spent his life as a Middle Eastern archaeologist. The site he's most famous for was Sparta, and it read like a bio of Indiana Jones. I mean, it was marvelous. It was downright inspirational. It was poetic. It was completely and utterly false. There was not a single word in it. Not a single word in it that was true. At the very first time I did this, I went through the exercise of saying, no, it's wrong, and getting that lovely thing, oh, I'm so sorry, my mistake, I'll correct, which is what ChatGPT does whenever you tell it it's wrong. It apologizes, because it's an amazingly polite system. It is a lying bastard. But it is an amazingly polite system. But, you know, it's amazing. It's improved so much that everything it said was perfectly accurate. A little vague, but perfectly accurate. In general, because of the training process and the refinement process that the variants of GPT have gone through, it tends to be very positive. And so it's hard-pressed to tell you that someone was evil or did a bad job. But that's astounding. Now, I'm going to do something, and that is I have 40 minutes with you. I'm setting a timer for 30 minutes because no matter what, I want to stop at some point and have you ask questions. Because if you don't get to ask questions, you will be angry at me. But I actually want to let you know who I am somewhat. So yes, I'm a professor of computer science at Northwestern University. I have worked in artificial intelligence my entire career, which I believe is decades long, my entire career. To work in AI and decide that you're going to make it your life's work, you have to believe one thing, and you have to be adamant about believing it. And that is that I believe that there is no aspect of human cognition that cannot be brought to the machine. Creativity, consciousness, intuition, emotion, we will bring it all to the machine. And that's essentially saying that I think that that human beings are mechanisms. And there are other people who don't believe that. And that's fine. Not many people in AI believe that, but every once in a while I'll run into somebody and I can't understand why they're in the field. But that's in my head. No aspect of human cognition, there is no aspect of human cognition that we will not bring to the machine. But you notice that I'm also co-founder and was chief scientist for a company called Narrative Science, which we have subsequently sold to Salesforce, about actually coming up on 2 years now. I got to tell you, if you've got an engineering team and they're trying to produce product, if you walk into their offices and say, by the way, there is no aspect of human cognition that you cannot bring to the machine, they will ask you to leave. Because what they are interested in and what they should be interested in is their deadlines, the quality of the product they're working on, the fit of their product to what the market needs, an understanding of the client, the user. That's what they're focused on. And so whenever I would be over at Narrative Science, that would be in my head. Now, it turns out those two things meshed quite well in the long run. And that is, as a scientist, I believe in task and market. I believe in user. And then there's one other aspect. And that is, I did a year-long stint working for the United Nations. Not full-time, but once a month I would go to Geneva and I would work with UNIDIR, which is the United Nations Institute for Disarmament Research, working on policy issues having to do with autonomous lethal devices. Colloquially, what autonomous lethal devices are is killer robots. And the thing I learned during that process was really pretty straightforward. And that was, there were people making policy decisions that were very important policy decisions about the use of artificial intelligence and robotics, as, in this case, as weapons, who had no idea what the hell was going on. I mean, zero. Down to the point at which, at one point in a meeting, I made a comment about a machine making a decision. That it was a submersible. It was the idea of a submersible that you drop it into the water and it would be floating around for 6 months. And I said, and then at some point it will see something that's untoward and it will make a decision to destroy it. And people at the table around me were like, "What the hell are you talking about? Machines don't make decisions." I mean, that's the thing a human being does. Machines don't make decisions. And I had to go through the process to explain that machines are making decisions absolutely all the time. Absolutely all the time. They're decisions in the same way we make decisions. So those three things are in my head, and those three things are in this talk. So I'm going to talk about the landscape, and then I'm going to talk about the new landscape. So I'm going to talk about a little bit about pre-GPT or pre-ChatGPT. Because I think it gives you a good context. Then I'm going to talk to you about what happened and what I think the real impact on the world is. And for me, and this was to a great extent what I learned by working with the UN, we have to be thinking about how these technologies are impacting us. And since you're more business than policy, thinking about it in terms of how these technologies are actually impacting our businesses. My guess is anyone who is looking at the, just a show of hands, who has actually used ChatGPT in this room? All right, now I'm going to ask the parallel question. Who is not? Who is not? And I'm going to pick on somebody. I'm going to pick on you. Why not? Because you will do evil things based upon it? You will be seduced by the technology and drawn in? Or you think that technology in general, not good things will come of it?
I think technology in general is going to turn into the next fear of an arms race, good versus bad, and it depresses me to think about it, so to see it in action, I think good will come of that.
Okay. You also, do you raise your hand as well? Why not?
Honestly, just haven't had a great use case for it yet.
Oh, jeez. So for each of you, I agree with you. There is a horrific arms race that we were about to, see. We're seeing emerge. But the best way to deal with that arms race is to understand what the technology is. You can't envision using something. I'm sorry. You can't envision using something that you haven't. Dare I say it used? And I would say use it. I'd say use it, and you will think of you will think of use cases. And I'll give you an example of this. My wife works for the Lincoln Park Chamber of Commerce, primarily doing marketing. I tell her about technologies, and she tells me to shut the hell up. Day one of the pandemic, she said, I'm going to go arrange for a conference call with my people. And I was like, no, call them, send them an email and tell them they'll all sign up for Zoom and use Zoom. And she was like, yeah. And then she was like, oh, no, that's really good. For ChatGPT, I said, no, really, just sign up for an account right now. She was like, and then she went to get gas, and the little news thing at the gas pump had a story on ChatGPT, and she was like, Jesus. It's like once you get to the point where you are so popular that your gas pump is telling you about it. That's an amazing moment. There are those who just don't care. But I would recommend anyone who hasn't tried it, you use it. Not because I think it will change your life and become a glorious experience and you will see God, but because it's interesting to understand what it is and what it purports to be. So I would say that. But for a lot of people, where they're hearing everything that's going on, and in fact, even before ChatGPT, with AI, with machine learning, there was this whole thing of, we're going to fall behind. If you are told a piece of technology will disrupt and transform every single industry, and your company isn't using it, that's terrifying, right? So you're afraid of falling behind. On the other hand, you're afraid of jumping into it and making a misstep. That is, going so quickly that you're not thinking about it, that you adopt it and you waste money. Almost everybody, by the way, just so in terms of generative AI, we will waste so much money. So much money. Before ChatGPT, the numbers were about 86% of proof of concept projects around machine learning would end with that. They become proof of concept. They would never go on and become production. And it will be worse with this. It will be much worse with this. Not that I don't love the technology. I adore the technology, but it will be worse. And then how do you navigate this? So for me, dealing with the possibilities here, and this is sort of a baseline understanding of sort of what I think of, how I think of the world of these technologies. When you're thinking about the possibilities, is just stop thinking about the technology. And this is why I recommend you use it, oddly enough. Don't think about the technology. Don't think about what's underneath it. Think about what the functionality is. So don't think about the technology. Focus on the functionality. And then once you've got an idea of what the world of the possible is with regard to the technology, and you can actually erase some of the magic that you feel for it, let the functionality be driven by your business needs. Let the functionality be that you care about, actually be supported by the algorithms and the data, and understand that everything, every single piece of technology, including the most glorious pieces of technology, are absolutely in service of us. If you're a business, they're in service of your business. If you're a regular human being, which most of you, if you're a regular human being, it's in service of humanity and its goals. That the technology is there to serve. It is not there to drive. So the landscape. There's not even a question. You have used, everyone in this room has used AI at least a dozen times today. At least. It's amazing. It is everywhere, and it is so microscopic. So microscopic that you don't notice it. So a quick question. Who here uses LinkedIn? Who here uses, I don't know, Netflix? Amazon, the retail side. Amazon Prime. All right. All of these are driven by recommendation engines. Recommendation engines are powered by what's called collaborative filtering, where if one person has 10 things that they care about, another person has the same 10 things, but this first person has an 11th, odds are this other person will want the 11th. Right? All those systems are based upon that. as their recommendation, as part of their recommendation engine. It's amazingly old school AI, which is now fast and easy and better. So you've got it there. Anything that looks like a correction while you're texting, that's there. The lovely suggestions from Gmail about how you should respond, that's AI. It's all AI. And anytime you do a Google search, for the last 15 years, there was AI in the background. And by the way, you helped train it. That's my favorite thing right now is people. Do you everyone know what CAPTCHA is? CAPTCHA? So you go, and it's like, oh, I'm going to find it if you're a human being. Identify where the stoplights are. You click, 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 stoplights. That's great, you're a human being. Identify where the bicycles are, click, click, click. Identify where the trucks are, click, click, click. Why is this all about traffic? I don't understand. Identify where the cars are, click, click, click. It's like identify where the speed limit signs are, click, click. It's like, oh my God, CAPTCHA, which is designed to stop the machines from using sites by testing to see if you're a human being. The CAPTCHA results that are taken from you are used to train self-driving cars, just so you know, right now. Used to be that it was used to train against text, but we're really good at that now, so good job. But that's why you don't see a lot of text in CAPTCHA anymore. Or whenever you see it, you go, oh, they don't really care, because the machine's going to come through this anyway. We are using it everywhere. And it is absolutely an integral part of all things business. So what we're looking at it now, we've got machine learning, which is at the core, natural language processing, understanding this, deep learning, everything having to do with image and speech, and self-driving cars based upon deep learning technologies. Facial recognition, also that. Voice recognition, also that. Language generation, again, ChatGPT is gorgeous. There was stuff before, but it's gorgeous. Recommendation systems, robotics, self-driving vehicles, all of these, AI at the core. It is part of our lives now. It will become more and more part of our lives in the future. But the question is, well, why now? Why did it happen now? Why is it going so well now? And it's really pretty simple. Almost all of AI right now is driven by sort of a foundation of machine learning. And the notion is that we want to be able to take data about what's happened in the past and use it to train a system to say something about the future. And it's really important to understand those two words, past and future. Because, in fact, what we'll see is that the issues with machine learning are because if you're learning how to respond to the future based upon the past, you're making a bet that the past was right. And if the past wasn't, what you're doing is you're incorporating every mistake we've ever made into what we're building in terms of future systems. But all of the work that we're looking at nowadays is really based on the successes of machine learning. And why today? We could have had this before. There's a fellow who I absolutely adore named Jeff Hinton, who started working on what would become deep learning 40 years ago. 40 years ago. Nothing worked. His ideas did not work. 10 years into his ideas didn't work, he said, no, I really want to keep doing this. And people would literally say, Jeff, you really got to stop working on this. I mean, work on something else. Work on something where you get a result. Because his mechanisms learned so slowly that no one thought they'd ever amount to anything. 20 years, please, for the love of God, Jeff, stop. 30 years, Jeff, really, you're embarrassing yourself now. 40 years. It turns out when we say something like something learned slowly, what that means is that between any two examples of training, so I've trained on 10 examples, and now there's an 11th example. It's a slow process. Geez, if I have 100 million examples, I'll be able to learn. I'll be able to learn from those, and I will learn fast. And so, kept going, and then one day, Jeff was like, to hell with all of you, I was right all along. Please, here's the account, write checks, which is literally what he did. He was incredibly successful because he was absolutely dogged and refused to give up on the idea. But it came down to we needed data, and we got data. Because right before there was the world of AI, there was the world of big data. We were so excited. We're going to go out and get data. We'll get data on our competitors. We'll get data on what people's attitude towards us is. We will get data on our customers. We'll get data on our sales teams. We'll get data on all of our products. We will get data. And we succeeded incredibly well. I will give you a number, which I really love. Today, in terms of data collection, we collect what amounts to be, if we were to turn it into text in a book, the equivalent of 500 books for every man, woman, and child on the face of the planet every day. That's how much data we have. It's great. Most of you don't use much of that on a day-to-day basis. But that's what we collect. So it was really successful, but then we realized that we were using very little of it. We were using microscopic pieces of it because we realized that we didn't really want data. We don't want data. We want information. And mapping data to information is a non-trivial problem, which is why we invented the data scientist. But to deal with the equivalent of 500 books of data a day for every man, woman, and child on the face of the earth, you need a lot of data scientists. And they're very expensive. They're very smart. They're very clever. Some of them are really good looking, but not many. We don't have even in the ballpark or even anything imaginable in terms of enough of them to deal with the data that we have. And so there was this weird thing where data became the problem, but then the problem enabled the solution. And the solution ended up being AI. So for us, as we were looking at the world of data, we realized, we could actually start doing statistical machine learning. Machine learning that's associated with things like the relational databases that we have. Really crisp, clean things where I want to predict sales based upon sales, where the thing I want to predict is actually, I can articulate what it is, and the data that I'm using to predict it, I can articulate what it is. So if I have sales, I have a salesperson, I'll have products, I'll have individual sales, I can aggregate them, and I can use those to know what's going on now, and then, because I know what's going on now and in the past, I can predict the future. But all the words and all the symbols I use there are symbols I understand. Then there's deep learning. And deep learning is, I have a document, and it has 800 by 1,024 pixels in it. And so any given one of those pixels, you're like, well, what's it called? And it's like, we don't call pixels names. We don't give them names. So we have all this data. We don't really have a way of articulating it semantically. But we can take it and say, I can take this data, and by the way, I'm going to take 10 million of these examples, and I'll be able to recognize cats after that, which was Google's big push, first big push forward that was visible. So you can take this data that is incoherent to us and turn it into something that's coherent. So I can hear a sound, and I know it's a gunshot or a voice or a word. I can see images. I know their faces. I know their particular faces. I know actually, because you've done a really good job, again, training, I know it's a stoplight. There are all these things that we do, but the underlying data is bizarrely incoherent to us. But the results are not. The results are not. Evidence-based reasoning. This was, did anyone pay attention to Watson, the early IBM Watson? Remember it won Jeopardy? It won Jeopardy not because it could reason hard, but but it found a way to use evidence to find possible answers, and then sort of aggregate those answers and come up with something. An incredibly powerful technology that only works if you have a lot of data. All of these things are completely driven by data, including, for me, natural language generation, where, in fact, it's not just the data has to be there, but the data has to be something you care about. So the machine used to be able to generate, has been capable of generating language that is saying things for years. But we didn't have anything to say. I mean, it didn't have enough. There was nothing we cared about. And now we've got data, and we care about it, and we can turn it into language. So it's part of our business. We have a lot of, dare I say it, companies in this space now. And we filled up easily. Because there was a moment, particularly in machine learning, where here's what the world looked like. I want to build a company that can that sells socks. Well, that's stupid. I mean, who cares? No. I want to build a company that sells socks online. Yeah, everybody does. And then there was a moment, it's like, no, I want to build a company that sells socks online and gathers information, gathers data about my individual customers, so I can actually build up data pools for machine learning, and I can actually send this data to other people to integrate with other data sets. And it's like, oh, okay, that we'll put money into. That we'll write a check for. That was in the era of machine learning. That's where a lot of these companies came from. But of course, that was yesterday. And yesterday is over. It's bizarre. I have watched as technologies that are associated with AI, that are either AI or AI adjacent, have transformed, for better and for worse, massive swaths of the world. This is the first time a new technology for me has transformed my field. And not so much because the technology is new, but because of what had happened to public opinion. November 30th, 2022, ChatGPT was launched. OpenAI did not know they did not know what was going to happen. Well, they had 1 million users in 5 days. Easily the fastest rate of adoption of any piece of technology, of any application in existence, ever. Meta released something that was their Twitter knockoff relatively recently. It also had a very fast adoption rate, but it failed almost immediately. Nobody cares about it. This is adoption, and it's stuck. 1 million users by the end of January. Today, literally, billions of users coming to the system monthly. And then it spawned other models, other companies doing it. It spawned the integration with Microsoft. And I got to tell you, remember I said, you do anything, you do a Google search, there's AI there? Google has done a lot of work in this space, and they really resisted bringing it out. And the combination of, this is why I mean it's changed my field, the combination of ChatGPT and OpenAI and its amazing adoption rate, and Microsoft deciding to invest as much as they were going to invest, literally bullied Google. And I want you to think about how much it takes to bully Google. And they started pushing things out, which were not ready. We're not ready. And I think they're willing to admit it. So we've got this technology that's coming out, and then the world started responding. And the responses really came in 3 forms. This is the greatest technology that has ever existed. There is nothing like it. It will change everything. In this space, my favorite is David Brooks. Human beings are soon going to be eclipsed. David Brooks is a political writer. It's like he doesn't know what the technology is. He's not a sociologist. He's a political writer, but he's not a sociologist. So I look at that and go, yeah, maybe. Who knows? You certainly don't. On the other side, there were the skeptics. And you got to love the skeptics. Because I build things in this space all the time, I have lived a life of people saying, well, you're never going to be able to do that. Even on the commercial side, you're never going to be able to do that. For narrative science, we'd generate narrative from data. So if you had a whole bunch of data and you didn't know what was going on, we could generate a narrative. And the number of times that I would sit down with someone and they'd say, we know that you can do anything in the sports world. You can build game stories for football and baseball and hockey and whatever. We know that you can actually build out systems that can take a look at the numbers associated with someone's portfolio and give them a portfolio report. We know that you're generating earnings statements for Forbes. We know that. But my company, our data and our metrics, it's so special. It's so different that we don't think you can do it. And when I would always agree with them, you're right. It's probably really special. You're worrying about the performance of this factory, right? Yes, we are. So what you want is a performance review of the factory, and you want to be able to, you've got some metrics that you're using already. Yes, we have 10 metrics we use. You want to compare it to the other factories you have? Yes, we want to do that. We want to see which factories are doing best. Do you want to compare it to how it's done in the past? Yes. Do you have some benchmarks that you're going for in the future? Yes, we want to be able to see if it's going well. It's like, oh yeah, we've never seen that before. I mean, to do a thumbnail of it, we will call this performance review, where you have an entity, you have metrics, you have time, you have a cohort, and you have future targets. So we're going to go for that. It's like, yes, that's right. Wow, that was wonderful. I mean, we didn't think you'd be able to understand what we did. And it's like, yeah. So every time any technology comes out, people say, no, it's not that. It's not that. It's not working. It's no good. You are wrong. And this is my favorite. AI is a glorified tape recorder. Just so you know, even as a metaphor, it's a crappy metaphor. I mean, it just misses the mark in terms of what the technology is doing. And so it's like if you're going to at least say a tape recorder on steroids, which is usually what people go for, it's just like, all right. And then, of course, the final group, the fearmongers. Jesus. Oddly enough, this morning we're taping for CASME, which is the center I run. We're taping what we're calling one idea, one example. And it's me bringing it down to as short an issue as I possibly can. Just say, here's an idea and here's an example of it so you can remember it. Because I really believe that the only thing that works is examples. Examples and metaphors. And one of the pieces I did this morning was, is AI going to kill us all? And went through what people are thinking and why they're thinking it. I love this. A whole bunch of AI honchos signed a document saying that we should consider AI to be an existential risk on the level of nukes and pandemics. I assume they didn't say climate change because they thought climate change was too controversial and let it take care of itself. And it's like, wow, you guys are part of the problem. All right. I'm not going to open the questions quite yet because I have to show you something. I always love this notion, well, everyone's got their opinion, and, it's probably all in the middle. There's an answer in the middle. And for me, it's...
everyone is wrong.
Yeah, I'm just like... I like John Mulaney because he's Chicago-based. When you're taking a look at like ChatGPT, and people are saying, oh no, there's a real existential threat associated with AI, you got to understand that ChatGPT is not smarter than you. It's not an answer to all questions. It's certainly not an existential threat to humanity. And I think it's important to understand it's an incredibly useful language tool. Now, I'm going to very quickly, I'm going to tell you one thing. And then I'm going to show you an example of what I think we can build in the future and what the future can be. And that is what ChatGPT really does, what all these models really do. Does anyone have any idea in this room what they do? It's okay. It's okay to be wrong. I have colleagues who are wrong about this. Well, I'll tell you. So here's what ChatGPT does. This is, by the way, this is the slide to make you really scared. ChatGPT, for a living, what it's designed to do is designed to guess the next word. So when I say Chicago is often referred to as the windy, what's the next word? Yeah. I'm going to go watch a football game. I'm going to sit down, and I'm going to have a huge plate of buffalo chicken. Oh, nice. The rain in Spain falls mainly on the... Oh, great. That's what ChatGPT does for a living. It's just that it does it at scale, and it doesn't use it with 3 words. It does it with... until yesterday, it did it. The best one would do it with around 6,000 words. That size has increased to probably around 100,000 words. Which is to say, if you were looking at something and there was 100,000 words and you had now to guess the next word, I swear to you, you'd be able to do a really great job of it. And that's what ChatGPT does. Now, it turns out when people look at that, because it is so good at that, it feels like it's doing something else. And the term I have for it is a card trick. That is, you look at it and you go, oh, it's actually answering my question. And it's like, no, it's continuing, it's thinking of itself as continuing with what looks like a bunch of words that would follow this question. And what happens is, when you ask it for the bio of my dad, it says, oh, I know how to answer bio questions. And I will start by talking about where someone was born. And then it'll get to that point where it's like, Philip C. Hammond was born in. And it's like, I've never seen that before. He's an archaeologist. What are the odds? London. Oh, yeah. They all come from London, don't they, all those archaeologists? That's the thing Brits do. He was trained in, what is it? Well, he was born in London. I know that because I've already written it down and I'm looking at it. He's an archaeologist. It's Oxford. Yes! And that's what it does. And it's gorgeous at it. But it doesn't know any facts. It does not have any real information in it. It's certainly not a search engine. But it is ungodly fluent. And it knows about structure. That is, it knows what a bio looks like. But if you ask it for a bio in the voice of James Joyce, for George Clooney, it'll write an amazingly poetic bio. And at the end, there'll be a quote from James Joyce about George Clooney. Just so you remember, James Joyce is way dead. But it knows, or it has encoded that in a bio, by the time you hit a bio written by a famous person, by the time you hit the end, the famous person has to give you a quote about the person in the bio. There's the description, and then there is their opinion. And so it says, as James Joyce said of George Clooney, and then it says something, but the thing it says is the most likely thing. That's all it is. It turns out that all by itself, is unreal powerful, ungodly useful. Right? And you can do all sorts of things with it, but that's at the core. It doesn't think like us. It doesn't really talk like us. It's not us. All right. But I want to show you what you can do with it. With it, this has to do with a turning point. The one thing I didn't mention is I run something called CASME, which is the Center for Advancing Safety of Machine Intelligence. So I worry all the time about the harms caused by AI, and there are a lot. But That's not my core research. It's a thing I happen to do because someone had to do it. This is just a data set. This is actually a Salesforce data set. You can't really see it from Salesforce. There is, and it's not even a real data set. It's the tiniest snapshot of a microscopic version of it. It's data at the level, and Salesforce is even small, but it's data at a level where it would never occur to you to look at this data yourself and suss it out. You might think about you build a chart or you build a graph, but 3 charts in, you get bored and you stop looking at them. And for me, what I do is I look at stuff like this and say, well, how can we communicate it to people?
Let's take a look at Helen Crane's performance this quarter. Helen's performance this quarter has been exceptional, putting her at the top of her team. Helen closed $191,242 in sales with 93 deals and an average deal size of $2,056. For both deal number and total sales, Helen was at the top of her team. She was also near the top in deal size, with a top closing of $8,333. Looking at progress, Helen's total this quarter was up by $10,555, or about 6%, over last quarter, putting her near the top of her team in terms of quarter-to-quarter improvement.
Nothing you just saw exists. That woman doesn't exist. That background doesn't exist. The charts were generated by machine. She was generated by machine. Her voice was generated by machine. Everything she says in terms of conclusions that she comes to were calculated by the machine. It knows what to calculate because, for the love of God, we know what a performance review looks like. You can generate. The only thing is that it takes to generate this thing in total, it takes about 30 seconds. But it doesn't really matter. You will enjoy a moment of this.
60 agents drove nearly $1,182,000 in sales with an average close of $1,582 against 747 deals. This was a 13% increase over Q2, but only a 6% increase compared to Q1. The top 3 agents this quarter were Louise Parker, closing deals totaling nearly $195,000. Terry Hamilton with $72,688 in sales, and Harold Murray at $65,989.
This is the part I like.
9 agents, 15% of the sales team, who had absolutely no impact on sales, while there were 5% of the team, who actually had negative impact.
It's aggressive discounting. Just so you know that I'm not completely mercenary and all I care about is business, although oh my God, you're business people. This is actually my favorite example in the entire world of anything. The city of Chicago has sensors up and down the lakefront, grabbing hold of water quality data. Once an hour, all the sensors wake up and they report back to the city. Chicago is an open data city, which means they publish. The city publishes the data. This is sort of a sample of it. On any given day, the combination of expertise in water quality, the sensors that are being used, and data analytics means that maybe a half a dozen people, I'm sorry, I'll be conservative, maybe 24 people can understand what these data mean, which is great. No, it's not, is it? We've got all this data, and it's valuable data, but we don't use it. We don't know how to use it. But you can actually build a machine.
In July 16, 2016, 63rd Street Beach was the cleanest beach in Chicago, as measured by the cloudiness of the water. Ohio Street Beach was the dirtiest beach in Chicago, as measured by the overall turbidity of the water. Beach goers would be advised to visit Oak Street Beach that had a better than average cleanliness rating speed.
So it'll tell you where you should take your kids. So I'm trying to think of it's 24 people can understand the data. Chicago, 10 million people can now know where to take their kids based upon this data. And that's what AI can do for us. Now, I'm going to show you 10 seconds of Elizabeth because this is taking that core technology, which I love.
This is an example of innovation driven by user
There's more, but I want to hit the counterpoint to this, and then I'll open to questions. The reason why I wanted you to show this is that the thing I love about her is, and you don't see the functionality here. She's integrated with Zoom. You start up a Zoom meeting, and she just comes on as a participant, and then she listens. You notice that I didn't say Elizabeth and ask a question. I said Elizabeth. Before that, I said, it would be easiest if she would introduce herself. And she understood she's supposed to introduce herself, but only if she's called upon to do so. In general, she's an information system that is based upon using whatever the context of the conversation is, including changing context, to make decisions about whether or not she has the information you would want. And what do you do in a Zoom meeting if you've got something that somebody needs to hear? You raise your hand. And that's what she does. And it's marvelous. You're talking, and she raises her hand. And you go, Elizabeth, and she tells you something about what you're talking about, and it's fantastic. That is the upside. And I'm going to touch very briefly on the downside. Remember I said killer robots. I'm not worried about killer robots. I'm not worried about AI killing us all by any means. But I am worried about this. There's a rise in rates of depression in young women between the ages of 13 and 23 who are interacting with social media because they see a curated version of the world while they are only living in their own version of the world. There is a rise in digital addiction. That is, the model of a business model of engagement taken to the extreme is a business model of addiction. We've seen the rise in dark patterns, which are patterns of interaction which get us to make decisions that we don't want to make. All of these things are issues having to do with utilization of AI in the world. And remember I said something about recommendation systems before? You are now living in a world where you often are making decisions based upon recommendations provided to you by a machine, which means that your ability to make decisions without those recommendations is day by day by day being eroded. And there are ways in which we can simply fix this. And it's easy, but we don't. And the reason why we don't is because we're so damn scared that AI is going to kill us all. And that's what we're focused on now, as opposed to thinking, let's solve the problems that are in front of us. And with that, I'm going to stop. I'm hoping, that's not bad. I still have a few minutes for questions. So I'm going to see if you have any questions. I'm hoping you have questions. If you don't have questions, I will become clinically depressed, just so you know. So questions? Yes.
Wait, hold on. Let's continue. Sorry. And we only have time for about 2 questions. I do want to keep us. My phone is telling me I have to stay on time, so it's a machine telling me to do something.
Yeah, Professor, thanks for the time today. You brought it up at the very beginning of your speech, but can you comment a little bit on this executive order and the government's role in trying to regulate AI and their...
I'm in favor of, we work a lot with NIST, the National Institute of Technology Standards. And I'm a believer in regulations because we won't do it without it. I like the executive order, but the executive order is more guidelines and direction. And the thing I don't like about it is it's a little too focused on generative AI. And the reality is that generative AI is bright, shiny, and new. And so we point at it. And I have been at meetings where I'll say, well, there are these things we should be looking at. They go, well, but it's all so new. And so we should be, we got to figure out how to respond to it. And they're actually against regulation. We have to figure out how to respond to it before we regulate. And I'm like, it's not new. It's not new. There are problems that we know, that we completely understand, that have been with us for at least a decade, and we haven't responded. So that's the only downside I see of the executive order. It's a little too focused on the generative side. But everything else, the thing I really like is that it portions out the problem to the different agencies. Because Homeland Security know what their problems are better than the FDA knows what Homeland Security's problems are. And so you push them out to the agencies Let the agencies begin to wrestle through things. And in fact, we're doing a workshop in January that is aimed at bringing in people who work on ethics for the American Medical Association, the American Bar Association, the American Society of Journalists, that is aimed at what do you need to know from us so that you can refine your thinking with regard to how to manage what you say to your members about AI and ethics and being responsible. But I think, so I like that part of it. I just wish it were more, I mean, the fact that we have not, I mean, the state of Illinois is suing Meta, which I'm, God bless. I mean, really, that's around digital addiction. And I think that's a good thing because we can't legislate it, but we can sue. And I think I would much rather that the states actually grab hold of the things they think are damaging for their people and go after the companies that are damaging them. And then it'll turn into regulation. So I like it, but it's it's a little skewed. It's got some really strong positive points, but it's still a little skewed towards generative AI. Good question.
Let me see if I can.
He was first. I already talked to you.
Hi, at the top of your slide on problems, which you didn't have time to go into, it said bias and fairness. Could you expand what those problems are?
Yeah. So Amazon famously built a resume review system based upon the resumes of their people and performance review. So you get somebody who's got great performance review, you take their resume and you say, this is a person with who's going to do really well at Amazon. You do that with all the Amazon employees and the history of Amazon, and you can build up a really great system. And they did that, and I got to tell you, the AI people at Amazon, second to none. They did it, they started it up, fantastic, really effective. Oh my God, it was a sexist bastard. And you look at that and go, well, is it the AI system? No, it's not the AI system. It's a really good AI system. There was a moment where people thought, oh, it's the data. And it turns out, no, it wasn't even the data. It was Amazon. It's that women did worse in performance review than men. That was it. And they shut it down and they had to start introspecting. There are some places, though, where if I'm building a speech recognition system, what I will use to train it is the things I have at hand. So you see a lot of technologies that are built by using undergraduates to train systems. But who are the undergraduates that are in schools? They're not the disenfranchised. They're certainly not as many foreign students as you might expect. So you've got people who look like me who are training systems with examples based upon people who look like me in speech recognition, and so we miss accents. In facial recognitions, so women and anyone of color is under-recognized. And then in systems that are sitting around based upon, remember I said past and future? If you actually performed, if you actually had, I don't know, made decisions about who gets and doesn't get a loan that was biased to begin with, and you train a system based upon that, your system will be biased. And one by one, we keep training these systems without considering the fact that we are simply rebuilding the future based upon the past without considering whether or not the past is what we want. And that's where the bias is. And again, there are places, I'm going to give a quick example. There is a lawsuit going on right now. There's an African-American man in Florida who was arrested because the police had a video. They shoved it through their facial recognition system that they use for their mugshots. He pops up, they go out, they get a court order, they arrest him. There was no world in which this guy had committed the crime. It was impossible. He wasn't there. It's not the kind of crime he would commit. They arrest him and he's suing. And you look at that and go, oh, we've got to fix that system. And yes, you have to fix that system. But there's that moment of the fix also includes the fact that the police who used it trusted the system. They believed it was right. And I'm actually a big fan of, for systems like that, you have to actually have the interaction be such that the system says to you, I'm going to give you what I think is right, and now I'm going to give you 5 examples of what I think is right, and I'm going to intermix in those 5 examples 5 other examples where I guarantee you I'm wrong. I went out of my way to find things that are wrong. And what you have to do now is you have to mindfully, one by one, do further investigation. And so I've improved I've improved and sped up your ability to go through mugshots, but I'm not going to take away from you. And this is a huge issue for me. I'm not going to take away from you your ability to, or the need for you to be mindful and thoughtful. But there is not a system out there based upon machine learning that is not biased. It's just that sometimes the bias doesn't matter. But they're all biased. They're all biased. That's it.
I'm going to have that be the last question because we are up on time. But I appreciate you being here with us. And a hand for Dr. Hammond.
Thank you. And I'm hanging around. So anyone who wants to talk, I'll talk.
Thank you so much. And we're going to take about a 7-minute break. And if people can be back in the room at 3:40, that would be great. Thanks, everyone.
Okay, I think we're going to go ahead and get started. If you can take your seats. It's okay. Okay, I think we're going to go ahead and get started. Sorry for my apologies. Sorry for interrupting everybody's conversations. I want to keep us on track. Great. All right, thank you. Sorry for interrupting everybody's conversations. I just wanted to try to keep us on track here. And my name is David Lin. I am a managing director and head of investment research at Altair. So thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. You know, I wanted to start by saying I must confess because my wonderful colleague Anna is not the only imposter at Altair because I too employed ChatGPT to help me write my introduction for this panel on AI. I was very impressed at what the original output was, and I was so impressed I tried to challenge it a little bit. I said, help me write an introduction and make me sound funny and witty and make people like me. And it actually did a really good job, and so it kind of has a sense of humor there that I was very impressed with. And while I'm no longer going to read to you the output of my introduction, since Anna stole all of my thunder, I wanted to, I was so amazed at what it actually produced in terms of the volume, in terms of the quality, and it was in a matter of a few seconds that it produced all of this from a simple query. And while I've used ChatGPT enough times now to appreciate that generative AI is absolutely a game changer that will accelerate productivity in meaningful ways across all industries. And it's going to create huge investment opportunities moving forward. There's no doubt about that. And so I thought it only made sense to have a panel where we have investors, one from the private side and one from the public side, that are on the front lines of trying to find these investment ideas. And so the good news is that many of the clients here, already have artificial intelligence in your portfolios today. Through Kleiner Perkins, which is in a lot of our accolade funds, and also through our large cap growth managers, including Zevenbergen. It's in the portfolio already. So I wanted to introduce our panelists today, who graciously flew in from the West Coast to be at our forum. And we'll start with Lee Marie Braswell. Lee Marie is a partner at Kleiner Perkins, which is one of the largest and most established venture capital firms in the world. Lee Marie focuses on partnering with the next generation of infrastructure and machine learning application founders. A graduate of MIT, Lee Marie was also an engineer at Google and Scale AI before beginning her investing career as a principal at Founders Fund prior to joining KP. We also have Anthony Zachary, who is a principal and portfolio manager at Zevenbergen Capital Investments, which manages around $4 billion in assets and targets primarily high-growth, publicly traded companies that are poised to be industry disruptors. After starting his career as a credit analyst, Anthony has been on the investment team of Zevin Bergen for almost 13 years. So let's go ahead and get started. And we'll start with Lee Marie. Lee Marie, maybe you can start by explaining your role at Kleiner Perkins. Maybe talk a little bit about your investment thesis at the firm. And perhaps you can just share with us maybe some of the AI investments that you guys have already made and then some areas that you are targeting today.
Absolutely, and thanks so much for having me. This has been awesome so far. I'm Lee Marie, so I'm a partner at Kleiner Perkins, mostly focused on early stage, so think seed to Series B, so maybe first financing to a few private financings in. And I mostly look at, especially these days, everything in ML, so whether it's applications or infrastructure. Actually, prior to becoming an investor, I was one of the first engineers and then the first PM at Scale AI, which is a ground truth data company that started providing ground truth data to autonomous vehicles and then went on. Now they're providing ground truth for a lot of these foundation models, including OpenAI today. And so it's something that I've always been very excited about from seeing self-driving cars and then now just seeing how, the past year, every programmer I know is using some sort of assistant to complete their programming task. And the vast majority of people that I know have at least tried out ChatGPT or interfaced with it online in some way, maybe without knowing it. Kleiner, we've been quite involved in the quote-unquote generative AI space for actually a while. And when I joined, we'd made many investments that are really taking advantage of what's going on. So if you recall in the last presentation, you saw the fake people talking about fake data. I confirmed that was actually powered by a portfolio company called Synthesia. So we led their Series B a few years ago, and they've seen tremendous success in helping enterprises create, especially learning and development videos. So think about how boring it is when you just hear a voice drone on and on and on. It's much more engaging to have some sort of visual stimulus, like the video that we saw in the last presentation. We're also investors in Glean, which is an enterprise assistant. So think ChatGPT, but for your enterprise, so using your own data. We're investors in Captions, which does video editing with generative AI. So think of all the videos you might watch on Instagram Reels, auto-captioning those videos, even allowing people to speak in different languages that they don't even know. And we're in Coda, which is an AI-powered note-taking tool. Viz, which helps detect strokes early and automates actions in the background. Infinitus, which does B2B healthcare calls. So think of all the rote calls of prior auth and other sort of back office healthcare tasks. Infinitus automates a lot of that. So over the years, have just seen so many early applications of this company, and now with all the advancements in the technology, these companies are all doing really well, and I'm really excited to continue finding use cases where perhaps the incumbents have some sort of counter-positioning narrative why they can't add this technology to their product, or a startup comes in and has a data or tech advantage. So that's what I'm kind of focused on today.
Excellent. And same question for you, Anthony. Maybe you can talk about your role at Zevin Bergen. What's your investment thesis on AI, some of the things that you guys have been investing in on the public side, and maybe areas that you're targeting today?
Yeah, so I'm a research analyst and portfolio manager at Zevin Bergen Capital. We're an investment firm based in Edmonds, Washington, which is a suburb north of Seattle. We use fundamental analysis to identify mispriced stocks where expectations are either too conservative on a degree of growth, so market's too low, or the duration of growth, where the market is too short, so on a long-term basis. We often find investment opportunities in areas undergoing significant change, such as technological. AI is relevant here, where new products, new behaviors, and so forth disrupt the status quo. And we also believe that people matter, that businesses, strategies don't execute themselves, entrepreneurs, executives, visionaries are the ones building the future. And unlike venture capital, we believe the story continues after IPO and that there's a lot of wealth creation potential still in the public markets. And so as we think about AI, and I'll be forthright, we haven't made any investments because of AI, but AI has created growth opportunities, and I've said in client meetings before that where there's disagreement or where there's change, there's often opportunity. But how we understand the AI investment landscape, we simplify it into a three-legged stool. And so the first leg is what we call the building block companies. These are companies like NVIDIA and AMD that provide the computing, the processing and the memory chips, the networking cabling, and we'd also put the electronic design automation software companies in this bucket, or even the capital equipment that's used for manufacturing the chips that are then used for AI and machine learning development. The second stool leg is what we call the data vaults. These are the companies that have access to or large proprietary unique data sets that help refine and train these models. Companies like Professor Hammond talked about Amazon. There's Adobe. There is Microsoft. Meta. The third stool leg is what we call the distributors. These are the companies that can get AI into the hands of business customers and as well as individuals. And we believe that businesses in corporate America, they're interested in this technology, but it's going to take time for them to adopt it, and they're going to rely on their trusted advisors. So companies that are in the Fortune 500 or Global 2000, to adopt or purchase and then understand this technology.
Great. We're going to stick with you a little bit here, Anthony. So on earnings calls for the S&P 500, there's been nearly half on the earnings calls have been some mention of artificial intelligence, and that's up double from the prior year. And so what I'm curious about is, for those companies that you look at that are not considered technology or in that industry, what are some of the non-tech companies doing on the AI side that is interesting to you and your team? For more context there, 5 years ago, it was 50 companies out of the S&P 500 that talked about AI. Today, it's closer to 200, 200 plus. So does that mean every company or all of those companies are AI companies? No, they're retailers, manufacturers, healthcare companies, banks, financial service companies, but they're all interested in using AI as a tool to do more with less, is how we've understood it today. And I think what's really exciting is about what could happen on the innovation side because of AI or advancements in generative AI. I think of, through this earnings season, I listened to Tesla. So Tesla talked about advancements in its full self-driving beta program, and that they've now collected or analyzed 500 million miles across its fleet of cars out on the road. And we do believe that autonomous driving is one of the most important AI applications there are today. I listened to Uber. So Uber, the mobility company, their CEO actually sounded frustrated that he was asked about how they are using machine learning, because machine learning is really at the core of their platform. So he talked about image recognition as drivers sign up to drive for Uber, that they have to upload their license or whatever forms, and that's all processed through machine learning. They also talked about driver and rider matching as a machine learning problem. And then they talked about fraud and some payment cybersecurity type of stuff, but all machine learning. So I thought that was interesting. The third company that I'll just bring up is Axon, which is public safety technology. This is a company that pioneered the TASER electronic device weapon. So their mission as a company is to make the bullet obsolete, so to protect life. But they said that law enforcement officers spend 2/3 of their days on report writing, compliance, and that Axon is integrating AI into its software suite to help law enforcement officers save time on stuff that they really don't want to be doing, that they want to be out in the community. And so I think that was another example that we're seeing in the public space that's non-tech related. So Zevenbergen's portfolio management team is well known for doing extensive financial models on a lot of their companies and so forth. How do you even begin to quantify all these AI productivity gains into your models to try to understand what earnings returns might look, earnings might go up, or equity returns might translate into over time?
Yeah, one way we cut through the noise, whether it's technological or economic, is we try to answer the question, does XYZ affect the future cash flow generation of this company? Or does it affect the discount rate we use to value those cash flows? I think with AI, are there some opportunity for businesses to improve the efficiency of their research and development spend or their sales and marketing spend? I think there is. It brings up a couple of interactions I had with public company executives this year. The first was a CEO of an industrial company, and he said his most productive software developers were using ChatGPT to debug and refactor code. And so this mythical 10x engineer is becoming a 15x. It's very difficult to quantify that.
Sure.
But I also had an interaction with a public company executive in the financial information space, and she said they were mulling a 25% reduction to their customer service budget because of generative AI. And so that could drop to the bottom line, holding everything else equal.
Got it. Yeah. So Lee Marie, it's very fascinating given that you're at Kleiner Perkins, because you're kind of at ground zero for all of these developing technologies with all these startups, and you're probably just drinking from a fire hose with all these ideas that are coming at you. Based on what you have seen, what are some of the industries and roles that you think will be most impacted by the technologies that are being developed today?
Absolutely. So it is like slightly unintuitive. Like when you first think about it, what are these models that everybody's talking about over the past few years really good at? And so, I kind of divide my answer into like two categories of models. So the thing that we've mostly been talking about are the large language models, the LLMs, as a lot of people refer to it. This is what's powering ChatGPT. Basically, they are just really, really good at understanding and generating text. And so when you think about what industry is going to be affected by that, it's, where are there lots of people that are doing just that? So think about copywriting. That's probably the most obvious one. Obviously, copywriters are now super sped up because there's a draft. You just put your query into ChatGPT or some other model, and it can come up with a poem or an ad or whatever, as long as it's text. And then when you think about sales and marketing jobs, when you think about people who work in the back office in medicine or even in the front office, doctors dealing with patient notes, lawyers and all the text they have to sort through. All of these industries today, I know examples of people in all of these industries that at least use assistants that are powered by LLMs, if not fully automate parts of their job with LLMs. So that's kind of like the most obvious thing that we see happening. And obviously we're kind of at the very beginning of all of that, right? Because what's powering LLMs is this architecture called the transformer. That wasn't invented until 2017. Obviously many, many years of research before. And then, ChatGPT is basically a year old. So we were very, very early at the actual rollout of this technology. And then I guess what else LLMs can do really well that's a little less intuitive is code. So understand and generate code. So maybe some of you saw GitHub's Copilot. It came out actually before ChatGPT, I think, at least in the beta program, and it speeds up programmers, just like Anthony was saying. Some people say that they're twice as productive or even more. And so there's that use case of it just generating code, speeding people up, doing these really simple tasks. But then also there's the use case of LLMs can actually understand code. So they can understand web pages, they can understand websites. And so think of all the software that you use where you feel that you're just kind of clicking through things unnecessarily. Like, the software should really be able to kind of figure out what I want to do and map what my intention to like what's supposed to go on with the website. And that creates an incredible opportunity for sort of the next generation of SaaS. Can we create much more efficient, personalized, better software in place of some of the software that we use today that's clunky, not personalized to me, and just very unintuitive. And so those are kind of the two sort of main areas where I see LLMs really being rolled out. And then you look at the other stuff that's happening in quote-unquote generative AI, I'd call them just kind of generative models. A lot of them are powered by this architecture called diffusion. So if you've seen any of these images or people, like the synesthesia person, that have been generated by these models, not from people that really exist, or maybe they are, but it's the model in the background that's kind of like either, changing them in some way. And so when you think about all of the stock photos, or you think about how expensive it is to produce a video, or to produce like you have somebody's voice and you want them to say something, having them record that and make sure that it's perfect. Generative models can help with all of that. So really any industry that has anything to do with text, code, music, voice, image, video, AI can at least make people more efficient, if not like greatly increase sort of like the amount of output.
So this is a follow-on question, but somewhat of a similar question, because I saw you on a panel, and the things that you were talking about were mind-blowing. Are there certain AI technologies or applications that are super cutting edge, that are probably a longer time off, where these companies are swinging for the fences, that you can explain that would be understandable to the crowd, that would be very fascinating?
Totally. Well, so kind of maybe taking what I said a step further and kind of painting the long-term vision of a lot of this. I mean, you could imagine you have an AI programmer on your team. Let's say the task that, there's always a set of tasks that, as I used to be an engineer, that engineers hate doing. It's the really boring stuff. Like we've got to switch the language of our code base, we've got to upgrade our packages, we've got to do all this really boring stuff that if we don't do it, like our site becomes less reliable. There's some companies working on that today. How do we just fully automate that? Like how do we have somebody who can understand and do these simple rote tasks that all these companies have to do automatically? So you could even extend that further, and why can't they just take on more tasks and more tasks and more tasks? And then maybe you don't even have to be technical to tell this person what to do. Maybe you can code your own website and not be an engineer at all. And we're starting to see that in very simple versions of that today, but who knows, decades from now, like what's going to be the cost of software? Like will that go to a very low number, perhaps even zero? And so that's like kind of an interesting thought exercise. And then I guess another kind of cool thing that I haven't talked about, there's a lot of applications with all this technology to drug discovery, because these large models can understand DNA, RNA sequencing and things like that. And so even NVIDIA has like created a framework for helping biologists figure out like what are promising candidates to test for drugs and things like that. And so that's always kind of my argument. Obviously this technology is new, it's scary, but at the same time, it is clearly in some ways very, very good. And if we slow down progress, we kind of have to like look at all the things that we might be slowing down, and that could be, discovering new drugs and saving lives.
Sure. Thank you for that. This next question is for both of you, but I'm going to ask Anthony first, and then I'll get to you, Lee Marie, to hear your response to it. But AI is an extremely capital-intensive business, right? The infrastructure to build all of the systems is very costly. Engineers are incredibly expensive. The power to compute is astronomically high. And so you have the Magnificent Seven are all there with billions and billions of dollars of cash on their balance sheet. And it turns out that they all have corporate venture arms now that are interested in buying up all these tech companies, other tech companies. And because they have so much capital, they don't really have to manage to a certain return all the time, right? They can just buy up companies that some will go bust, but they're looking for that home run that they can integrate in their business. So these incumbents that we're going to call like the Amazons, the Googles, Meta, and so forth, with all the cash, how does anyone else compete and emerge in this world on the public side?
Yeah, well, to put some numbers on that, OpenAI, the company behind ChatGPT, said their GPT-4 variation cost $100 million to develop. And then Tesla's Dojo supercomputer, which will have some AI application, could cost upwards to $1 billion. And so these are huge sums of money that only the wealthiest companies in the world, the most profitable companies in the world can afford. And so I think this is why scale matters. And then I think these companies all realize that speed to market matters as well. And there was an interesting analogy or reference to the telecom craze or bubble in the 80s and 90s, that a lot of telecom companies, they were spending billions and billions of dollars putting pipes in the ground for future sales that had yet materialized. What's interesting now is that if you listen to NVIDIA, demand is through the roof. They can't keep up with supply. So there's some tangible demand here. And unlike the telecom companies of the 80s and 90s, these companies, they're in good spots financially, and they've been preparing for a potential recession for 18 months now, and they have room to improve their overhead or their operating expenses, and so I think we could go through a bubble, or another side of this optimism curve that we tend to see with other technological waves. There's a lot of hype at first, and then there's a digestion, and then there's a solid footing later. I think we're still kind of in that early stage, as Lee Marie had talked about.
So, Lee Marie, I want you to answer that same question, but the additional question on top of that is, you're now competing against these large public firms that have 60, 70, $80 billion of cash on their balance sheet to spend. And so now you're not only competing just against the next venture capital firm, you're competing against these publicly traded firms. So maybe you can first answer that question about the incumbents versus the startups, and then how do you think about competing when you have to underwrite to a certain return for your investors, but now you got these other companies that might pay a lot more for these companies and aren't as concerned about those returns?
So I guess the first part of the question, I think I do agree that if you want to train the most cutting edge large language model right now, it is extremely expensive. And that immediately limits the amount of companies that can do it. General purpose, cutting edge large language model. But what's been really interesting is seeing, I guess without getting too into the details here, there are things that you can do if you're just focused on a particular task that are much, much cheaper than training your own GPT-4. And so it's been really cool seeing startups that are much, much smaller than a Microsoft or OpenAI train their own models for a particular task, like coding, and actually surpass the performance of a general purpose model. And so I think that in some sense, I agree with the fact that not everybody's going to be able to train their own general purpose model, but I think if you're focusing on something much more specific and the whole weight of your company is behind that, that can potentially be like a good bet. And then I guess on the side of competing with the venture capital arms of some of these large companies, the value prop of Kleiner Perkins is quite different than I think some of these companies. And basically our mission is to really be the first call to founders who are trying to make history with their companies and to really partner with them in building their companies. And that's sort of the mission that we've had for the past 50 years at Kleiner Perkins. We have numerous investors and platform teams and portfolio companies that are going to help founders at the very, very earliest stages build out their company. And yes, it can be very helpful to get involved with a strategic down the line, but I think having that value prop resonates with a lot of founders, and it can make it such that we can both invest in these awesome companies.
Got it. Now, Lee Marie, Dr. Hammond talked a lot about some of the disadvantages of AI with hallucinations and biases and so forth. That I didn't really want to focus on that. I'm really more talking about the risks side of investing from a venture capital perspective in AI. What are some of the biggest pitfalls that you're coming across with being an investor and seeding a lot of these companies?
That's a great question. So I think we are nearing the peak of the hype cycle. ChatGPT is basically ubiquitous. It's in popular media. Most people have heard the phrase. We're even starting to see seasonality in the usage of ChatGPT. So obviously got to, 1 billion users very quickly, but then, now we're starting to see like some trends and okay, well, people are using it less during certain months and things like that. So we are kind of at the point where a lot of the population knows kind of what generative AI is, and as a result, a lot of investors are, chasing generative AI. So there's just tons of exuberance and excitement to go and invest in these companies at all these different stages. And I think that combined with how fast the tech is advancing presents a very challenging investing environment. So you basically need to find a founder who, you have a different belief about than sort of the other venture firms. Maybe you think that they're more special. Maybe you believe their thesis more. But there's going to be competition because there's just so much hype. And so, yeah, I think it's just figuring out Okay, if you're building an LLM application, we're not just going to give you money because you're an LLM, but we're going to figure out, is this actually a good business, or is this infrastructure going to be a lasting category, and sort of ignore just the general hype.
Got it. Anthony, what about you on the public side? What are the risks for public investors? Because I'm sure a lot of people here have taken some personal money and said, oh, this AI thing is going to be the next greatest thing. This is our iPhone moment. Mm-hmm. I'm just going to put capital towards this and hope it works out. What are some pitfalls that you're seeing on the public side?
Yeah, two angles to the risk question. I'd say the first angle is the risk of capital loss. And the risk of capital loss is often tied to the price you pay for that stock. And so if you buy a company at the top of its hype cycle, they miss estimates, they incur a contraction period, you're probably going to lose money in that. And so how would we mitigate through that? I think through our fundamental analysis, our willingness to underwrite management teams that we respect or have history with. But I think the other side of the coin is the risk of missed opportunity, that we are too conservative or too skeptical of AI, therefore we choose not to invest and then watch the world move away from us, and then we miss the next Amazon or the next Tesla or the next Meta. And so how would we mitigate that? I think keeping an open mind, asking what could go right rather than what could go wrong, and staying patient, knowing that this innovation is not going to go from 0 to 100 or from 0 to full adoption throughout corporate America in days. It could take years, and I think that's how we're approaching the general risk management question. In terms of the companies that have AI products, so about half of our portfolio either have talked about publicly that they have products related to AI or that they're using AI. So it is ubiquitous, I think, as a tool, or certainly there's desire there to use the tool. I think for the risks around the industry, I probably there's still a lot of hesitance from companies that we talk to on integrating ChatGPT or something like that because they don't trust the output. And so there's could be a slow digestion of this technology. Then I'd say the regulation too. If we think of chips as important to national security, AI as an extension of the semiconductor ecosystem, we probably could see more regulation for like national security, and then there's like copyright stuff. So that will probably get ironed out over the future.
We have a few minutes left, and I'm going to open it up to the floor for questions for our panelists here. But I did want to ask both of you one last question. Anthony, as you've immersed yourself in reading everything you can about AI and how it relates to the companies that you're invested in, have you come across things that you think are getting lost or overlooked by the market today and not being accounted for?
I think popular media overlooks the bottlenecks in the space. So I talked about the actual adoption versus the willingness to adopt, and the willingness to adopt or the actual adoption is going to play out over years. It's not going to be a flip the switch type moment. I think, there's been more press about the GPU supply-demand dynamic, that NVIDIA is going to its manufacturing partners saying we need more GPUs or processor chips to sell to our clients. And will that shortage turn into a glut, or will that shortage of GPUs or processing chips turn into new innovations? So do companies iterate around the GPU market? I don't know. I mean, the second is memory chips. From what I've read, that we're hitting the rules of physics, that we can't make chips or memory chips denser. But so now companies are stitching together or networking multiple memory chips to handle these large models. And so as Lee Marie said, there's been this emphasis on making models smaller, more specialized to get around some of these limitations on the engineering side.
Got it. And so, Lee Marie, you live in San Francisco. You're networking with some of the smartest minds in AI down in Silicon Valley and throughout the peninsula there. What are some of the inside conversations that you can share with us about what's getting overlooked or lost and that's not being reported in the media.
For sure. Yeah, one thing that you said I would love to expand a little bit on because I agree with it. Like a lot of what's going on and how to integrate this new tool into software it's not just extremely obvious. Like there are still tons of concerns around data privacy, latency, regulation. Like and there are all these questions that startups are having to face, especially as they sell to enterprises. And so like a lot of that's not completely figured out, and people are really rushing to build enterprise-grade products that incorporate this new technology. And some of the winners of that space are going to be incumbents, whether it's like an incumbent startup, so a startup that was made pre-LLM proliferation, which let's call that beginning of early 2022. Some of like the growth stage startups will integrate and win versus like a net new startup. There will be some industries where like there's tons of startups that will be started, and yeah, probably the incumbent will win. And so like that's one thing that I think doesn't get reported on a lot because it's such a new technology, but a lot of incumbents and growth stage companies are in a really great position to incorporate it.
Great. Thank you both. Does anybody have any questions from the audience here? Can't really see too closely.
I see one.
You know, so much of the media hype, for those of us who are no longer in a 24/7 active business kind of thing, is aimed at the consumer market. We know there are probably, 50 to 100 million phones in use of consumers between the ages of 2 and 18. How much of what you hear, is there a bifurcated market? You've talked certainly about the business side, and we try to think in a much different way than you would of a Amazon or a media-directed market aimed at everybody who has a phone.
I think that's a great call out because a lot of what we've been talking about has been enterprise, business-to-business companies. It has been interesting seeing, like, I don't know if you've heard of, for example, this company called Character AI. That's probably like one of the more talked about companies in the space of course, you can use these LLMs for business purposes, for research, for all the things that we've shown today, but you can also use it as a companion. Like it can have a personality and it can imitate somebody that you really want to talk to, like a celebrity. And so Character AI is probably the startup that has kind of like gained at least a lot of mind share in sort of the Bay Area. And then, I mean, Meta, I think, and the previous talk alluded to this, has put now a similar functionality in Instagram. So you can talk with, but it's a little weird because you can talk with people who you don't recognize their names, but you see that it's Kendall Jenner, you see that it's like some celebrity, and the personality is modeled after that celebrity. So there's definitely like a big use case of like to combat loneliness, to have friends online that remember things about you. And it's something that, it's an area where we're looking for investments, but it's been interesting. Those models do need to be somewhat general purpose and large, and so all of these companies either have a lot of money or have raised a lot of money to do that, at least that I've seen so far.
Questions? Gentleman in the middle.
Thank you. Could you talk a little bit about what effort is going into verification of the data which is used to train systems or processes?
I could try to answer that, but I think the question about the importance of data, I think is worthy of having, but and also the quality of data or the relevance of that data. And I think from the business side, will a business manager gain an edge based on a large language model trained on Wikipedia? I don't think so. I think the efforts or the value will come when a generative AI model is trained on corporate data or internal data that isn't easily found in the open web. And I've also heard that data will run out in a few years, which it's kind of mind-boggling that there's going to be an end to the amount of data that's found via the open web, whether it's Wikipedia, Reddit, or whatever, and that we could move into a world of synthetic data. That the outputs of these large language models will then be used for the inputs. So I can't speak to the verification efforts. I do know it's an important problem. I bet Professor has a better answer there.
Anything? Any other questions? Is there one there? Oh, there's one on the way back.
Hey, thank you. This question is actually for Lee. I'm at a fintech startup, and we use AI every day, and we're building products. To what extent do you see strategics being more aggressive about partnering with startups at the earlier stage to get exposure to AI? Because in our experience, that they just are confused and are busy running their day-to-day operations.
I guess when you say strategic in this case, we're not really talking about, I mean, NVIDIA obviously has tons of exposure to AI.
Well, I'm in a banking tech startup,
Okay.
so maybe a large bank or something.
Okay. I mean, definitely seen some of it. I've also seen, quite frankly, banks be open to taking a chance on very early stage startups to do pilot programs or things like that. Because, I think that a lot of banks realize that it's the perfect use case for a lot of this stuff, like all of the text that you have to sort through, all of the rote processes that you have to do inside of a bank are very likely to be automatable, or at least to augment the people that do them with some sort of assistant. So I've definitely seen some eagerness from banks to at least try out a lot of these startups, and then some with the venture capital arm perhaps investing at some point. But I do tend to see strategics come in the later stages. So it's very rare to see them in a first, second, or third financing. It's more so when the company's of a scale at which that sort of investment might make a little bit more sense.
It probably also depends on the industry, right?
Yeah.
About what their margins are like and how much capital they have to allocate towards those strategics. I imagine in lower margin businesses, it's going to be a lot harder for them to take those risks and chances because the return on capital is so important in a lower margin business.